I saw the delicious, comfortable chairs wheeled out earlier on. So I suggest now we adjourn and go out to the storage room where the chairs actually are. But they won't let me. So, right. We're going to follow up, actually, on a session that some of us were involved in, and some of you may have seen if you were at the Video Insider Summit up at the Mohonk Mountain Lodge, which was a glorious location and a really good event. A couple of months ago, Ken referred to it. Somebody said it was great. I said it was glorious. It's a delightful place to go. Go to it when they do it again. But basically, that was a panel of 5 agency people talking about what they were kind of expecting from the Newfronts based on last year, what they hoped for from the Newfronts, and just how significant they thought it actually was. What we're going to do now is bring one of those individuals back, Adam Potashnik from Mediacom, and also bring up a couple of other people from the publisher side. Chris Rowley from Weather Company, formerly Weather Channel. I was saying earlier on, these guys should just go for the whole hog and brand themselves as Weather. And also Alexis Josephs from Vivo, 2 very, very different digital players, to actually talk about what happened at the Newfronts, what could have happened at the Newfronts, how significant it is, and a whole bunch of other things as well. So if you guys want to wend your merry way to the platform and join me on these uncomfortable chairs, for which I apologise but claim no responsibility, I'd be very grateful. I see 2. Alexis, where are you, my dear? She was with her people. She was being minded. Is she around? She might still be out front. She was out there. She collected a badge. I was talking to her, briefing her.
Oh, that's fine. She can sit there.
She's in a little black number, as they say in fashionable circles. Right. She's also going to make a fashionably late entrance, I can tell. So, let's do what Ash did earlier on. I've talked about where you're from. 140 characters, and I really mean 140 characters. None of this Twitter tweet that goes on for about 6 minutes. Chris, what do you do at weather.com? At Weather Company in a tweet like?
I was hoping to get those 6 seconds in the vine. Can I do this?
That's kind of thing, yeah. Otherwise, you explode.
First of all, as a representative of the Weather Company, I just wanted to think about yesterday. We had a pretty tough weather event out in Oklahoma. We're thinking of the folks out there. That was pretty tragic, and we're out there on scene, and it's a tough one. So our thoughts and prayers are with the folks out in Oklahoma. But my role at the Weather Company is I oversee the cable sales as well as cross-platform sales. So we roll everything up together between weather.com, on TV, online, on mobile, as well as tablets. So that's what I'm overseeing, primarily focused on the television aspect of it, but everything we share that number as a company.
Okay. Longish tweet, more of a Facebook post. Adam, see if you can beat him.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Potashnik. I'm a senior partner, group account director at Mediacom, and I've been leading the Dell business since 2007. And I've had the pleasure of sitting on many panels with Mr. Bloxman over here. So this is quite an honor. Thanks again for inviting me.
That's Adam, and I was also a glutton for punishment, which he didn't previously mention. And right on cue, we have Alexis Josephs stepping up onto the stage from Vivo.
Try not to fall.
Alexis, the challenge at the moment is, in true Twitter speak, give us 140 characters or thereabouts on your role, significance, importance to the world of Vivo. What do you do? We got sound?
Yes.
There we go.
Hi, everybody. I run East Coast sales for Vivo, as well as sales strategy and global partnerships. So what that means is I work with clients, I work with vendors from a business development perspective, and I also work with joint sales partners in market.
Cool. Thank you very much. Quick commercial, by the way. I don't know if you've already seen it, but I was very taken with the freebie that was giving this away. Is it Flycast? It's a really, really cool little speaker out there. It's a chunky little metal thing you plug into your phone or any other digital device. So, unfortunately, we're talking about digital video, but this is digital audio. Go get one. And they're not paying me. Okay, so let's talk about that panel at Mohonk. Some of the takeaways, I kind of wrapped it up at the end and said, okay, so if there's one thing you guys kind of said to the agencies we're going to say about what you wanted out of the Newfronts, what would it be? And it kind of distilled down, and it was very helpful that Joe Mandisi at MediaPost kind of quickly wrote this up in a blog post. We had things like, make my job easy. In which we meant, I want to buy things more easily than I currently have to. It's a struggle. I want my job to be seamless. Well, we all want that. There was talk of accountability. There was an overlap with measurement, discussed very ably earlier on. It's a challenge. looking at things like granularity and making things actionable. One criticism of the previous year was it was really interesting, but there was very little follow-up, no meaningful engagement. That was wanted this year. We'll find out if there's any feeling that that was actually provided. And Adam actually said that he wanted to be inspired, he wanted to be wowed, he wanted to see something he'd never seen before. And the fact we've actually got him here, and I can hold him accountable for his words, leads me to say, well, wowed, inspired?
I mean, some of the events definitely were inspiring. There were some phenomenal guests, and there was some phenomenal programming that was put forth to brand marketers and advertisers across the industry. I think certain companies, certain advertisers definitely were there, and definitely were there to be buyers. And there were definitely many, many more advertisers there that were just pure observers, just to sort of see what is going on there, what do these media companies have to say in these venues, and why should I be listening at this point in time? So, I mean, I was inspired by some of the media companies and some of the content that was put forth in these large venues in these very extravagant ways. But I think it really breaks down from on a particular advertiser by advertiser basis. You know, was it inspiring for them, and was it worth their time and value to get involved now and start to purchase that inventory actually as an upfront buy, or can they wait it out like many of the other advertisers in the marketplace?
Yeah, and I guess the issue about whether it's inspiring or not can't be separated from inspired to what. If it's inspired to engage, to buy, to allocate money, that's inspiring. To be inspired by the fact you've got Snoop Dogg in the room and wow, drink a lot of martinis isn't necessarily quite the effect everybody's after. Chris, Alexis, I mean, from your perspective on the other side of the fence, do you think the Newfronts actually delivered in terms of the spectacle, delivering sizzle, and you know, staking a serious claim on the attention and mindset of the buying community this year, more so than last year?
I would say it definitely had a lot more sizzle, a lot more attention to it. We had a lot more clients in town to be able to participate in that week. So to that degree, a success overall for the publishers. I think that from an advertiser or agency perspective, it's all about what's the value. Ultimately, what's the value to the client on this? And I think if you're talking about digital video, it's all about following that consumer. And I'm not sure a lot of the folks that were presenting were actually following that consumer, giving that advertiser. What's that value? Why do I need to actually meet during the Newfront week, right around the upfront? And then what am I doing? What's the advantage in trying to get that audience through a long-term annual deal? I don't think that was really projected well in regards to that really making a lot of sense for a lot of the publishers.
Okay. Alexis, would you agree or violently disagree with that?
I wouldn't violently disagree with anything. But no, what I would say is that the primary objective, for at least for Vivo, was to actually show how scalable our content is and what the successes have been. So for us, we looked at it as an opportunity to not only show content that's had 3 years worth of growth, but also to prove that we're more than just music video. Sometimes a lot of people forget that. So for us, it was very much objective one, understand what the content is and the successes that we've seen with the content. Number two, reclaim our value proposition in regards to that we're more than just music video. And number three, explain and identify opportunities for buyers to work with us in terms of true partnership for both online video and mobile video, because for us, 51% of our audience is also now on mobile.
Okay, so with all that in mind, what do you think were the kind of standout successes or the highlights of what this year's Newfronts actually achieved that you can look at in terms of short term or slightly longer term? Because obviously this isn't something which happens and then all the deliverables, all the benefits are felt within the next 2 weeks or something.
I thought what was key is things that are really being announced or things that are really have value, that are really making news during that week. And I think that certain things, whether partnerships with social media, with Twitter, extensions on television, because a lot of this, particularly in that space around television, people are saying, really, how do you get scale? And for an awful lot of the digital video, it needs to still be tied to the linear television properties. So, I mean, when you talk about where digital video has gone, last year with the television upfronts, really started to see a lot of that happen with the flex programs that the broadcast networks had and CW had, and being able to do that. So that's where you're really seeing that digital video, because it's easy to execute. And if you refer back to that letter, the Adweek letter by everybody, by the top media agencies, they're coming back to that, saying that's what you need. You need scale. You need to be able to believe in the video that's out there and to be able to measure it. And I think there was a lot of that was still lacking in the digital Newfronts this year.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that letter specifically in a little while, but Adam or Alexis?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the conversations were happening way before the Newfronts, came out to the public. So a lot of the brand marketers and the advertisers were speaking with all the media companies way before the Newfront content was announced. So you knew if you were in the market for branded content or really great original programming, what was aligned to your brand and what would make the most sense. So you were able to be very selective going to the events across the given week. I think you also have the ability now to sort of wait it out because you're not, there isn't a strong need today to go in and buy that programming that's just being served up. As an advertiser or as a brand, you can work with any given partner all year long and be able to construct and develop out content that is most relevant for your brand. So it doesn't have to be a force fit into the original programming that they're putting out, but it's very much a collaboration that you can have throughout the course of the year. And you could be working with the relevant brands and the relevant media companies all year long, and you don't have to always just, take what is served up on a platter to you.
Yeah, and in that respect, of course, it's very different from the upfront. There's not a point at which books get closed and they say, well, this is how much we generated out of the upfront, and when Wall Street looks at their performance and all the rest of it, it's totally different in that respect.
We took a crack at a couple of things because we have such a large television property as well, to be able to create things during the Newfronts that will allow us to utilize digital video and bring it across all screens, all 4 screens for us, so that we announced something with Twitter, so that if we're doing a segment on television, I think a lot of the folks know the weather company, we're doing the Home Depot Project of the Week. So the Project of the Week is something that's produced. So all of a sudden, utilizing the Twitter card, we can tweet out the Project of the Week. Home Depot can retweet that. They can buy, obviously, promoted tweets and things along those lines. So that's tied into a television upfront. That's one example of doing it. And then we also announced at the Newfront that we were doing we're producing from award-winning producers short-form video, 2 to 4 minute videos that starts online, but then comes back to television. And again, we have the ability to do that because we do a lot of live programming. But again, so it does create a little bit of scarcity in some of those things that we're doing, but overall, I agree with you. Without scarcity, there's not a need to commit to a lot of things that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was very impressed by the content that you guys were putting out. Definitely as a leader of a very large account, always out in the marketplace looking for various new opportunities. And I was very surprised by the stuff that you guys were putting out. Wasn't even aware that was part of your arsenal. So that program, I believe, is called Alive. And some of your other original programming, I think it will draw an audience. But my question to you, or actually to the both of you, would be, how are you guys getting behind those programming? So how are you actually going to be promoting this original content so that it is something that draws those audiences, and it's not just incumbent upon the advertiser to sort of just push the audience there, but how are you guys getting behind your big bets and pushing advertisers and audiences there?
Go ahead. Sorry.
As I say, so a couple of things in terms of what you just said. So for us, I think at Vivo it's a little bit different because there is scarcity that starts off. So we have a dominant demographic of 18 to 34, which is very difficult to reach on TV at the scale that we have. We also have a dominant demographic of Hispanic 18 to 34. So there are brands that work with us because they do want to take those opportunities off market, but they started working with us last year at the close of last Newfront to figure out partnerships for this year. So for example, we closed a deal with Univision, where Univision and Vivo are working together to create really compelling original program that has to do with 2 specialties. One is that our syndication, distribution, and scale for original programming is pretty much second to none because of our partnerships with YouTube, with Twitter, with Facebook, et cetera. Univision does not have a dominant player in market for 18 to 34. They also don't do original programming the way that we do. So by combining these 2 forces, it does create an urgency to have to purchase this program because there's only one. The second is we love when the Newfront is actually situated because we are a TV complement. When you think about this year's dominant season finales and premieres, between The Voice, X Factor, Nashville, American Idol, they all have music at a core. The labels own Vivo. We therefore get a lot of the content that you see on air because we have the exclusive rights. So when you see Justin Timberlake perform on SNL, we get that performance. When you then see certain episodes of Glee and their performances on Glee, if that music is owned by the labels, we get that content. So people are looking at us as The Voice ends in April, May. What is Adam Levine, Shakira, Usher doing over the summer? We get that content. So for us, it's definitely seen as TV's complement, as well as why you have to buy us for our demographics beforehand.
I want to know what Shakira's doing over the summer.
That's right.
I would say that's exactly, Adam raises a great point in a sense, and it's been brought out by a lot of folks that saw the Newfronts, is how do you get that scale and how do you really drive that online video? And that's something, again, we're a little bit unique position in the sense that we've got 100 million downloads of our app, we've got 100 million uniques monthly with our web properties, and 100 million homes and cable. So, but aside from that, or aside with partnerships like a Univision, I mean, I think that there's a struggle for that. And being able to do that. It's one of the major things, I think, in regards to the digital video on the scale, because in a lot of it, that's what the upfront's all about. It's about scarcity, but also getting that huge reach. And without, the avenues to do that, you're challenged.
Very much so.
I think it's interesting talking about scale, because, I mean, that's important to any advertiser, it's important to any media owner and agency and everybody. But there are an awful lot of digital products, digital platforms, that can't match television for scale. Don't matter what they say, they're simply not going to be able to do it. The bigger TV properties, day in, day out, week in, week out, they're going to beat them. And the advantage of you guys is you straddle both. One of the things that I don't hear that talked about nearly as much, though I know it is talked about to some extent, is the context. Digital media have different contexts in which consumers engage the content. Mobile's a very good example. We all know that people carry mobiles wherever they go. That means mobile tends to be closer to the point of purchase. It's a great path to purchase medium, and so on and so on. That doesn't necessarily mean it should be getting just as much money as TV, because it's a totally different user experience. But do you think in these Newfronts there was enough emphasis placed upon the contextual benefits of digital video as opposed to conventional linear video, for want of a better phrase? Or do you think it was just too much about, hey, we got some great new content, great new programs, and we're basically a TV upfront wannabe?
I'll take that one. I was going to say, in terms of what we see, is that there is definitely an area for improvement in terms of measurement, but I think that we've done a really good job of highlighting the number of streams, the number of uniques, the way that we strategically syndicate, promote content to make it really measurable. In regards to the comparison to TV, I would actually shift it another way. I would hate for an advertiser to have to put all of their content, in terms of all the revenue that's applied to this content up front, knowing that they don't even know what innovations are coming out in the near future. So one of the things that we have found really successful at Vivo is that people who are actually purchasing media, they look to see, okay, well, I know I'm committing this in the upfront, but I will have a chance to potentially shift this later out if it doesn't work. And so that, to me, has been a very interesting switch, where it used to be there's always going to be online video as the afterthought. Now there is a pause saying, okay, but if this doesn't pan out, I can always go to online video or mobile video as my complement. Whereas it's not an afterthought, it's being seen more as a strategic partner upfront or a ladder strategy should something not work on TV.
I would say that I think for this year, to answer the question, I think it was all about saying we've got big projects going on. We've got high quality video. So I think overall as an industry, if I can kind of lump everybody together, I think that was a major part of this year's event. And what was surprising to me is not more targetability on digital video and being able to localize and things along those lines that really complement television. I mean, when you're buying television, you're really looking for branding and for reach and things like that, but all the things that digital video can do were not really highlighted to an extent. We announced when we layered on kind of our weather effects that we can do, so how weather impacts consumer sentiment, behavior, and actual purchase. But I mean, for the most part, I think that missed in a lot of the what was said, because it was basically saying we're coming to the party because we have this content with all these great producers, with all these great actors and talent. I think that that was this year's message.
Adam, you think that's fair? Did you see anything to contradict that?
No, I mean, I was, like I said, I was inspired. I was impressed by the new kind of content that is coming out and the original programming that can be targeted to specific verticals and the ways that people can access that content across multiple platforms, and how it's not just being done, how the brands can go in and make a long-term commitment to that content and help to develop it out with given media partners and try to help tell that story that's really authentic to them and credible to their brand. So I found that there was definitely opportunity for marketers to get in there at an early stage and mold their story and really find the value for them. But certainly, I mean, targetability is something that's always going to be talked about. Measurement's always going to be talked about. But these are things that good marketers and good advertisers will always figure out for themselves what is the right KPIs for them and how should they be measuring a partnership on some kind of original content and programming, because you have to be able to take calculated risks. You have to be able to find the right media partner that'll get into the trenches with you and work with you and develop out content that will actually help move your brand health metrics or move your product or so forth. So it's really important for you to be able to understand who the right partners are, because there is such fragmentation and opportunity for any marketer to get in the trenches with so many different partners. So it's really focusing your investment and getting in there with a few, or one if it's really new for you, getting in deep with that one partner, figuring out how do you focus, because fewer definitely is bigger and fewer definitely is better in this market. You can't spread your investment across multiple properties. You have to focus that investment and sacrifice in maybe some other areas of your marketing mix. But once you make those sacrifices, you can then start to see those long-term gains.
So who did you partner with for Dell?
No comment on Dell.
Had to ask. Yeah. So, related question to money. What happened to the $1 billion? There seemed to be an awful lot of talk before the Newfronts, or put it this way, a lot of press before the Newfronts, which may have been suspiciously hype-worthy, saying, oh, this year the Newfronts are going to top $1 billion worth of revenue. It's really difficult to actually find anybody talking about money now the event's gone. What was that all about?
I think that's hilarious, just in terms of just that statement.
Well, in fairness, there were a few people saying that whoever's saying that is clearly smoking something. But nonetheless, that was a message that was out there.
They could be smoking many things. But I was going to say, in terms of, for us, I think it's an unfair paradigm to assume that you're going to convert for an ROI immediately following the Newfront, right? I mean, to give you two examples. We had been working with McDonald's and Coca-Cola long before the Newfront even started, and closed partnerships with them in January that were released in February, and we're still tracking them. So I think the idea of that you have to produce an ROI specifically from the Newfront when there are only various examples of where there is scarcity, that doesn't make any sense. So anyone that can assume you absolutely are going to book $1 billion within April to August, yes, I think they could be smoking many things.
And just being a veteran of television for many, many years and how this kind of works, if you compare it, how an upfront marketplace works versus the Newfront marketplace, it's never going to chase that. I mean, we probably lead on cross-platform deals, and to Alexis's point, we still close the digital portion, digital videos, months and months afterwards, and even 6 months afterwards into something that we presented as an upfront package. There's one major advertiser that we actually just rolled it into next year's upfront because we just couldn't come to terms with it because of the way the client, the agency were structured and what their goals were.
In fairness, one of the things that was set up at Mohang was that really a lot of the agency folks see this as it's an opportunity for FaceTime. Definitely understanding more about content, but they're not really looking to do deals. And this links back to a comment I got actually from an agency exec who I approached about being on the panel, who's going to remain nameless because the fact he said, yeah, you can quote what I'm saying. He declined to join the panel. He said, look, I would love to do it. It would be great. I would love to do it at any other time of the year, but because I and my bosses are so heavily involved in the upfront, I just don't want to be involved in a shitstorm, in his words, it would create for me to come up here and say what I think. He said these things. He's known for saying these things. But I said, so what would you say? And he said, well, bottom line, he says, I think the Newfronts are a colossal waste of time, and so do my bosses, and we're not the only people in the industry. He said that they're modeled after something which is not relevant to the digital space. To your point, there's practically no shortage of inventory. It's not time sensitive in the way that the TV upfronts used to be when all new programming came out around September and when, say, all new cars were released around the same time, so you had a shortage. And he said, well, we're questioning it for TV, though it still seems to carry on, so why in God's name would you set something up? And he was rather more colourful in his language. He used the F-bomb at least twice to my certain knowledge. And he said, I don't mind doing that on a panel, but I don't want to create hard time for my people up top. So that's a discordant note for the entire thing that we might want to discuss as to whether he's actually justified in saying that or whether you think he's over the top. But what was interesting was that within 24 hours of actually having that conversation with him and him declining, we had this little letter that came out, the open letter to Adweek, penned, and I will say that one of his bosses is actually on this, but you had it from some of the biggest names in the buy-side community. You got Dave Cohen of Universal McCann, Adam Schlachter, and John Macaris of Digitas, Amanda Richmond of Starcom, Walt Cherrick of Cara, Rob Norman, Group M, and John Nitti of Zenith, and Ben Winkler of OMD. Pretty damn big shops. And basically they're saying, you guys in the digital space, you've got to get your act together to make it easier for us to do business, and so on. Now, this letter was so beautifully wrapped in kumbaya that it was very, very loving, and it was, yes, we all believe in the medium, we all believe you're wonderful, and we all believe that together we can work. But, in essence, they were saying, we need to see you guys promoting the shows that you say are going to be so great for us and our advertisers, so that we can believe you're actually going to build the audience. Now, that's one thing to say to CBS. Arguably, it's something very different to say to a lot of digital players, because the scale of these players is very different. They also said, give us the reason to believe you're going to build an audience. Where's the insights that talks about how these people are going to consume the content and why that's going to be good for our brands? How do you substantiate that view so that we can actually report that back up the tree to justify our investments? And then also finally, back it with measurement, so that after the event we can come back and say, well, how did we do, and how did we do on this property relative to our other digital portfolio and the rest of our media portfolio to inform what we do going forward? Now, measurement was talked about in great length and great detail earlier, but was that a justified, to our digital colleagues, was that justified? Was that fair? Or do you think they're just blowing their own trumpet? And we'll get into Randall Rothenberg's response in a minute.
I can easily take that one. I think, and I think Adam would probably play that out. I think one of the big things is the clients are looking to figure out, how to follow their audience, how to follow their consumer. And so as the clients ask the agencies to do that, the publishers need to help them be able to do that, whether it's through measurement, whether it's through, how do you promote the digital video, et cetera. So we're all trying to figure this out, and certainly they're supportive of that because that's where the consumer is going. So I think that was, I love that letter going out. I thought it really kind of spoke to a lot of things that we talk about and how we make digital video more easy to buy, get through the process, get through the measurement of it, get through the stewardship of it, get through the optimization of it, and things along those lines. So, but I think that's kind of a reaction to it, because it's just like with the internet in the early days, going back as far as how is that structured? You have to have a client that understands what they're looking for. They have to set up their agencies as their AOR, how they set it up to be able to buy it. And somebody's got to champion within that organization to be able to do that. But the agencies, and bear me out on that, they're in a tough spot to be able to make this stuff work. And it also, quite candidly, costs you guys a tremendous amount of money from an agency side trying to figure this all out. So that's why I think there's a big challenge to get together on both sides to make it work.
Yeah, on the agency side, you can't just point fingers at the publisher side and say, this is something that you guys have to figure out, and you have to show us how to measure everything, and you have to show us how to be, how we can be more targeted with the with our buys. There's so much work on the agency side that can still be done to be able to understand how to value the original programming content, how to measure it, how to invest behind it, how the teams are still very much siloed across multiple different accounts, and how these things are not measured appropriately. So I think on the agency side as well, there's still a lot of work to be done to get those teams to think about this kind of original programming, to think holistically across the various platforms and media partnerships to be able to evaluate this stuff effectively.
I think also there's an area that I would address if I had the opportunity to be in front of the 8 that wrote that letter, which is, if you're asking us to make it easier for you, I would like for you to trust us in terms of the strategy that we put together. So a common pushback that we often receive is, well, for original programming, I want to integrate my brand into your content. Even though we say, but that's actually not what the results are showing. So we have, for example, 2 years worth of results showing the stream numbers, the tune-in, the users, and brands still want to integrate their product into content, even though that strategically is not what would be best for a user. So at the same time that we have to make it more measurable, I would also offer to a client and to an agency, but you also have to trust the producers who actually know this content and this audience, and not necessarily want to own and integrate into the content to make it feel like ownership.
Sure. By the way, if anybody wants to dig out that article, if you didn't see it, it was published in Adweek on May the 8th. May the 8th. So, as you would expect, the IAB didn't take this lying down, and President and CEO Randall Rothenberg duly penned his own missive, long missive, which I would imagine, I haven't seen it up there, but I imagine you'll find on the IAB's site. And in a similarly loving and courteous kumbaya sort of fashion. He agreed, yes, we can make this medium as spectacular as it deserves to be. But he also, I thought, rather eloquently pointed his own finger back in their direction at the agencies and made some pretty salient points, I thought. One of which was this notion of bringing to life what everybody's been talking about for ages, which is making a reality the kind of cross-platform media and marketing kind of idyll that we're all been working towards. And basically his point was, and I quote actually, yes, despite our violent agreement, it's hard to pull off. Agencies remain fragmented in the ways they develop strategies, craft creative, plan and buy different media, reflecting equivalent organizational and process fragmentation inside client companies, which I think is a very, very valid point. It's also related to that, which is not explicitly mentioned, is where does the expertise lie to actually pull this stuff off on a cross-platform basis? But one of the interesting things I think there is the reference to the client structure and client expectations, and kind of implied in there is remuneration as well. People tend not to point the finger at the client influence and role in this kind of scenario. But I think it's very much there in terms of how rapidly we're able to move forward to change the overall process of how we genuinely follow the consumer and make it work for everybody. What do you think about that particular part of his response? Agency structures and processes.
From my observation, I think the agencies have taken a large step in the last year or so. When you talk about just who wrote that response to that letter, most of those folks, or a lot of them, are now overseeing all video, whether it's television, linear television, or digital. So when you've got Amanda Richmond, you got John Nitti, David Cohen. So I think that the agencies recognize that and have made great strides in the last few years, much more so than I've seen, in the history of the industry. So I think the agencies starting to go that way. I think a lot of it, as he points out, I think it starts at the client side in a lot of ways, and what they're charging the agencies to do, and assigning their agencies that way and structuring it that way. But I think the agencies recognize that and are making strong strides that way, although it is a slow process.
Adam, you're on the inside, so what do you say to the agencies?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down, definitely, it's a client-by-client basis, and I wouldn't, boil it up to a specific agency, and this agency's doing it right, and this one has a long way to go. I think on a client-by-client basis, you're going to model your team and your people and the skill sets based off of what that client needs. And, on the Dell account specifically, we have one holistic integrated team that has one point of contact across all medium. It be the DR response, the stuff that generates the cash on a daily basis, and then also is thinking about what's more long-term or mid-term, and what should we be testing and learning now so it could benefit us down the road. So we have that integrated ability to be able to assess opportunities across multiple platforms and multiple media vendors all at the same time with one point of contact. So that's on the Dell account, but I do know, certainly there is room to grow across multiple accounts and multiple agencies, and figuring out what's the best model for that client. And as you work as you move on in your career and you experience different agencies and the inner workings, there isn't a one-size-fits-all. You have to be nimble on the agency side to best accommodate your clients' needs. And as you work with so many different partners, working with a Vivo or the weather company, it's a totally different conversation. They're coming at it from a totally different angle as well. So you have to be open-minded to be able to have a conversation around what the value Vivo brings to the table and how that could potentially be fit into the whole holistic plan that you're putting, and then how the weather company could reach the same exact audience, but what's the value of their content versus the Vivo content. So you have to be very open-minded and nimble in this marketplace.
Well, and the thing I would add to that is not only their content, but the context in which their audience is actually consuming. And we touched on this, Alexis, earlier on. Where people are when they're actually engaging with that. When your content, Chris, is so pertinent to how people plan out their day, for example. And you mentioned sentiment. I and my colleagues, and we work with that kind of data all the time, and I know MediaCom, you have access to that data, but it's not the lingua franca of the industry and how we go about approaching these things. We talk about content, we talk about reach and distribution, but as we're talking about a much more complex space, you're right, we can't have a one-size-fits-all because consumers aren't all the same, and they may engage with the very same content in a very different way at a different time of the day or a different day of the week, and that's really hard to plan for. So the notion of trying to make it more like TV, trying to systematize everything to the nth degree is great from the business model point of view, but it's not necessarily great from an effects point of view.
We see that even just amongst our platforms. We see 25% of our folks online, it's the last thing that they go to before going to sleep at night, versus the mobile apps where they're going on a consistent basis or checking as they're commuting and things along those lines. So even within the same similar content genre, how the context of the delivery mechanism is very, very different consumer experience.
Yeah, well, I always look at your app on my phone every morning. It's
Good, keep
bizarre.
doing that.
And I always think sweetly of you, Chris. I do.
We should probably see about some questions out there. There must be some, and we have one right here. Hold on. Even though you're the first one, could you stand and give your name and
Oh, yeah, sure. My name's James Lee. I work for investment firm COSA. So it sounds like based on what you said right now, it seems like the perception for advertisers and priority right now when it comes to online video advertising is more complementary to TV. How do I find audiences that's not watching TV anymore, i.e. the millennials? How do I get there? And which platform they're hanging out? Whether it could be Instagram, Facebook, or whatever. And that's where I'm going to put my money to work instead of doing a wholesale shift, right? Maybe original programming somewhere in the future, or or traditional media platforms using internet as a canvas for the content distribution. Is that right? And secondly, in terms of measurement, KPI, where are we in the process right now? Because I'm hearing mixed signals. Some people are still looking at brand lift as a priority. I think Google just made a presentation in a different venue saying they're doing real-time brand lift at this point. And some people say, hey, offline attribution is the key. Just help me understand kind of where they are in the process. And lastly, I promise, any opinion on YouTube? What is the major friction in terms of spending money there? Thank you.
To make it easy on us, should I take the first one? You take the second one? Okay. So I'll take the first one. So from the first one, which the question was around how are you planning it? Is it just complementary? Is that correct? So, I mean, it's actually been something where for big brands that actually are no longer spending their big budgets only on TV, they are finding the audiences and they are finding the reach, maybe not the same scale, but they are finding it online and they are running online video as a focal point, not just as complementary. For brands that are still spending the lion's share of their dollars on TV, they are now sophisticated enough to figure out how they could plan out the online video to be a complementary component of the media plan. So it is something that helps to raise their reach and helps to engage with their audiences and complements them. So they could lower their TV weight slightly and then fill that void of the lower TV investment and run the online video. So it's not fully at a loss. So I think it's just depending on, where are you as a brand? What are you looking to do? What is the, measurement, the back-end measurement that you have around traditional TV as a whole? And if you can make that decrease of investment in traditional TV and move some dollars online, you will be able to save you will be able to still pick up that reach and save dollars for sure.
If your second question was on research, and that's just a rat's nest still in regards to kind of how it's being measured. I mean, the acceptance of OCR for the online campaign ratings to try to get a GRP that can go across platforms is something that's had some limited success. Certainly ComScore is trying to do things along those terms, but it's really, really a big challenge. I mean, you look at what Nielsen's trying to, they're not measuring tablet right now. They just made some announcements they're trying to get back into tablets, but when you think about tablets are now in about 24% of the homes right now, and it's not being measured for online video. I mean, there's lots and lots of questions that way. And there's still the traditional brand metrics that you're going to do with brand lift, favorability, intent to purchase, those things. But those are more kind of syndicated deals that aren't in real time to be able to do that. I'm not familiar with what Google just announced there, but I can't imagine that would be accepted because it's really not accepted in the marketplace right now. And people are looking for things that go across platform to be able to measure that. Particularly, you're on the planning side much more than I am to be able to figure that out. So I think it's still going to be a mess for quite some time.
In regards to YouTube, in terms of, Vivo has a very positive relationship with YouTube. So I couldn't speak to how brands are reviewing their original programming slate, but what I can say is that as a result of our syndication strategy, so we have both a destination and a syndication strategy at Vivo, where you have Vivo.com, which is a dedicated owned and operated site, but then we also syndicate our content to YouTube, to Facebook, et cetera. As a result of that partnership with YouTube, we know exactly when to leverage our skins around the player, as well as the algorithm on the right-hand side, which is the playlist, that we can actually drive views to a very specific piece of content. So as a result of our partnership with YouTube, it's given us scale immediately. It also allows us to be a dominant player in terms of how to specifically drive traffic to one particular video whenever we want to. So for us, it's very positive. Couldn't comment, though, on how other brands are looking at it. I would say that you could probably read in the news how their channel strategy is going.
I have one more question before lunch, and I'll take it if there's nobody else going to. All right, very briefly, very quick fire answers. How long is it going to be before the Newfronts are merged with the upfronts, or do you think they'll actually continue to stand alone and flourish?
It depends on the media company. I think we're considering doing that now. I mean, I didn't know David Cohen specifically said to me, "Why are you doing 2 this year?" So I think it'll be dependent really on the media company, but sooner than later.
How much are you going to buy if we don't?
And I would say for us, we consider it an opportunity in terms of continuing, because we're very different than a lot of the players there. What I did find fascinating is that, to me, what proved the validation of the Newfront was the fact that CBS Interactive and NBC had their own Newfront separate from CBS and NBC's upfront. So when you see players like that still doing this and knowing the power and the opportunity for online video, that almost validates the innovators who were there first.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see things like WSJ coming in and all the rest of it. Adam, from your point of view, what would you like to see happen? Put it together, make life easier, or would it not?
Yeah, I mean, I said it at our last get-together that, I would love to see it together. I mean, that's how we operate. That's how we work. It would just be easier to have that one conversation that wraps it all up and brings it all together. But I am totally on board with the sentiment up here that there are companies, and those media companies, it actually gives them an opportunity, gives them a platform, and they're engaging with new clients that they wouldn't have an opportunity to speak to if they didn't host such an event. So it's going to be on a media company by media company basis. But personally and professionally, I felt that it would make more sense for those companies that are hosting their own upfront and Newfront to bring it all together.
So have a huge marketplace in the south of France. Like that in Cannes or somewhere. Okay, we've sorted it.
Hey, thanks a lot. It was a terrific panel. Let's give a round of applause.